Welcome to a family business podcast. If you haven't been here before, we're glad you're here today. We have a really interesting topic today. What are we talking about? Do you guys know?
Well, you told us on the text message what you wanted to talk about, but we'll let you explain it because it's your topic.
That's right.
Well, I would like to talk about the buzz in the world, which has kind of been a buzz for 6-7 months now, but it's kind of getting super heated now. There's been some things that have come out recently about how the topic of private listings or off-market listings or exclusive listings and the whole clear cooperation policy and how that all works in our business and what's going on. And you guys, I mean, you've heard some of the local news, right? Or not local, but you've heard some of the stuff in the news.
It's a rat's nest. I mean, there's a million different things going a million different ways. And typically when we talk about pocket listings or off-market listings, they aren't generally known to everybody. And so you just kind of have to play devil's advocate on that and see how that goes. It's not really traditional for our area specifically, just because our local board has different laws in place that kind of stray away from that. But
those are brought to our local board from the NAR for the clear cooperation policy, which is up for discussion.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, like I said, because with me being so new and I don't see it very often with these pocket listings and everything that I was always told is that, we have these things in place that are, kind of avoiding those situations because of what has come out. And it's pretty,
I feel like when you're talking, you look like PT, you're walking through a field and you're waiting to step on a mine.
Well, I mean, with this particular conversation, like I said, it's a rat's nest. I mean, there's a lot of different heated opinions on it. And for me, it's like I have never really kind of dealt with some of these situations. So it's interesting just to kind of see the outside perspective on it, just like everyone else that might not be particularly in the industry too.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with what I've experienced over the last 25 years.
Oh, that's right. Brad's been in the business for 25 years.
Well, almost
guys.
25, 24 and just over a half. So let's just call it 25. Okay. I mean, it's easy to remember that I started in 2000. So that's very easy to remember. Okay. So when it comes to what's happening out there right now, it's my opinion and my high school teacher, Mr. Myers, used to always say, Mr. Meyer, that is Rick Meyer, great guy. He would always say his opinion in 2 quarters would get you a pop in the pop machine. So
not anymore.
That was back in in the 1990s. But my opinion is that we're going down a slippery slope. It's my opinion that cooperation between brokers is in the best interest of the seller. And the reason I really think that is that gets every realtor in your area that's a member of the board trying to sell your client's home. If you have a majorly large company, there has been there's been one in Iowa that basically had their own MLS. And I think you can do that if you have a large company, but I still don't think it's in the best interest of the client that you're missing out on a lot of buyers from smaller brokerages. Now, the argument is that we're the largest brokers, so we run the market and we don't want to play by your rules anymore. And that's basically what is going on out there, which I can understand that too. There's other areas, those of you that don't know, like an example is New York City. Like they basically everything's private, like everything's quiet, right? And it works there that there is a handful of agents that basically kind of control that market, right?
Right.
In our area, we're not the same. We're in the Midwest, totally different market. And I truly think that clear cooperation is in the best interest of the seller in our area. I can't speak for larger areas that I've never sold real estate in those areas, but in the Quad Cities, I truly think that's in the client's best interest. In fact, if you recall, we just got coming soon, 2 years ago, here
Yeah.
in the Quad Cities. And part of that reason was
Not even 2 years ago. It was a year in January.
yeah, that's when we were able to advertise it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I think coming soon's great. That you get that out there, and then everybody knows that it's coming on the market, and it gives you a good gauge whether you're priced correctly or not. And that is because you put it out there to all the other brokers in the MLS to tell them that this home's coming on to the market, and then they can schedule the showings. And if you don't have any, then you're probably overpriced, and you can then adjust before you come
or
on the
you
market.
didn't time the market appropriately. Like you could possibly also have been putting in coming soon and listing it at a time that isn't historically a good time for showings. But in regards to your thing in regards to clear cooperation and whether that's a good thing here or other areas, because you can't speak to that, the stats that are out there right now are pretty clear, even in areas like New York, where they are showing that there are definitely sellers that could have or should have, on average, sold their homes for more if they would have exposed it to the entire, MLS
World.
database world.
Yeah.
Right. So that brings us. So this whole thing is kind of prompted by, again, this has been going on since like last fall, this discussion, but it's really gotten heated recently because Robert Refkin, the CEO of Compass, Compass has their, what's it called? Their private exclusive network or something. And recently, he actually, I think it was his earnings call for fourth quarter of last year, I believe. So it just came out. And he literally fired shots at NAR and the clear cooperation policy and was doubling down on this exclusive network or whatever that Compass now has. I can't think of the exact word. It's on my papers here. And what people are going after him about, which, I mean, I think the Compass model is, great. I mean, we explored it before we decided to make the move to Real. I don't think it was the right fit for us for numerous reasons. But what people are going after him for is they're saying his philosophy is, if you tune in and listen to that call, which it's pretty much everywhere, it's on several podcasts too, is that his philosophy is that it allows sellers to keep their property private and be more exclusive. And he says when people use their exclusive, what is it here? Let's look to see what it's called. Not exclusive networks. What's it called? Private listing network. Compass calls it private. So when they use their private listing network and their coming soon network, that on average homes are selling for 20% faster than homes that were not part of that. Okay, well, that sounds great. But what if, there's we always talk about this with sellers. There's lots of reasons why a seller accepts or doesn't accept a contract. Selling quickly might not be their main thing, right? And what people are saying, and his thing is that so the only people that have access to those is other Compass agents. Okay, so people are of course going after him, saying, well, the only reason why you're really promoting this and you're saying this and why it's such a big deal is because you want to basically keep both sides of that transaction within your company, because then you make more money and then you can attract more higher end agents, because Compass does kind of have that, I guess, I don't know, oppression in some of the markets are in, that they do a lot of the higher end business, which I would agree with that. So then you're going to attract more higher end agents because that's where they're going to come to find the listings. But again, my struggle with this, when I toss it around in my head 50 ways to Sunday, is I just don't see where that's in the best interest of the consumer.
Yeah, I always, in a lot of our appointments that you guys have been on with us, I always explain that it's a numbers game, and the more qualified buyers that we're able to get their eyes on your home, the more likelihood that the terms are going to be the best. And the quickness of the sale is important to some people, but like you said, it's not the be all end all. So I would disagree with that whole deal there. And especially in the smaller markets, I just don't see any way possible that would work. Now, once again, it's out of my area in the larger markets of expertise, but in the Quad Cities, it'd be very difficult if you did not advertise your homes on the MLS and have other agents working on your behalf as well as the seller's behalf trying to get their home sold.
Well, and that's where my perspective comes from. I mean, we're talking about New York, LA, some places in Florida. I mean, these larger cities where life is different, right? And I just think that the difference between this higher end market and then the rest of, or the majority of sales runs differently. Yeah. And you can make the argument for these higher end listings that already do these things and do it to a level where, it's, you hear about in Chicago with all these different private listings that are coming up. In our market, it's a rarity. Yeah. And I just don't think that plan would really be successful here, because yes, okay, these higher end markets, you have that unique or special buyer, and the home's most likely going to sit on the market compared to maybe a lower priced home. But there's no reason why to limit your buyer pool if it's a $250,000 home, when there's more buyers out there for that particular property. So for me, it's interesting that all this conversation is happening, because my perspective always has been is that, like, you want to attract the most amount of buyers to give your seller, the consumer or your client, the best ability to have the success across your offer options. Right. And it just seems like it's limiting. And I think it's the plain and fact truth that you just want to keep the transactions within the brokerage.
Well, and that's the thing, is people are also kind of going after him a little bit. And I want to clarify one thing. Compass does tend to get in some of the bigger markets they're in, they tend to get that branding that they do list more high-end listings. It doesn't mean that they don't list, normal price listings, but they do tend to, in a lot of their markets that they're in, list higher end. But the other thing that people are going after him for is the fact that, we are still in an affordability crisis for buyers. So now, if this is something you really push and you think this is the best, scenario, so you just want to have this private exclusive listing network, and you have to be at Compass or with Compass to see these listings. And now think about buyers that aren't able, again, to see everything that's on the market when there's already an issue with, historic low inventory. And the thing is like, okay, you go back to, I thought about this, Brad, like, because I remember when I first got in the business with you, your dad, we haven't talked about this in a podcast, because your dad was, one of the key people that we're by state region market. So we have Illinois business and Iowa business. It's hard if you've never been here, but we literally operate as one, even though we're two states. And there's just a river between us and several bridges, a brand new bridge, which is beautiful. But anyway, your dad was one of the people and that said, this is silly. Why do we have two different associations and two different, places that we're marketing listing? It just makes it harder for the consumers. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly, because, he brought it all together, and we do cooperate, amongst brokerages within the Quad Cities, which makes it easier as a consumer. If you remember when we were purchasing our property several years ago in Wisconsin, our investment property, that's not how they operated. And like, literally for us, we were like, okay, where in the heck can we go to just figure out what the heck's all on the market? And there's Compass up there. There's, a couple smaller brokerages. Now there's, Better Homes and Gardens and EXPs, there, Reels up there, all of them. But like, a lot of them have high-end listings. And especially when you get into that kind of exclusivity for high-end, okay, great. Compass has 20 of the listings on the lake, and, Better Homes and Gardens has 20 of them. Okay. So you have to go to every one of those websites to try to figure out what's all available.
Which is how it used to be.
It's nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes it harder on the consumer, like you just said. And my argument would be, the harder that you make it on the consumer, the less amount of money that you're going to get the seller too. And going back to one of the arguments is that with NAR, you have the board of realtors, right? So one of the arguments of these larger companies are that, all right, we have the most amount of agents, yet on the board of realtors locally, it's the smaller companies that are running that are making our rules. And they have a major issue with that. So I think, it stems from a little bit of that. And I can't speak on behalf of Compass, but that's how the bigger brokers look at it. My argument would be, get involved. Like, if you have an issue and you don't like how it's run, then get on the boards, get on the committees. So I really think the bigger brokers, They do have power, of course, but that's the reason why you have a board of realtors, so we all work with each other.
Well, and I would agree with that, but I guess I would also just say, I do, I mean, that is, I mean, I'll be the first to, throw that and slap myself upside the head, because we are not super involved in our local board. I mean, we are involved, but we could do more. And part of that struggle, though, and you and I have talked about this, and I'll just air it right out there, and I think there's lots of people that feel the struggle, is because a lot of the people that are on the boards at our local board are the people that aren't really selling a lot. Sorry if that hurts someone's feelings, but it is true. Or they did sell a lot, and now they're just kind of phased into a different part of their business. So now they're going to give their time to the board, which is great that they're doing that. But the problem is then you have people that are making decisions that are not actively selling real estate. They don't have their pulse on the market, because they're just not doing it. So then you have people who are top producers, right, in the market, that don't want to get fully involved, because they don't want to sit in these meetings and have discussions about rules and changes that people are arguing with them with, that sell 3 homes a year when that person sells 50 homes a year. And so how do you balance that, right? I understand the frustration, but I'm just saying, I get it. I mean, and even not being on a board, having those conversations with an agent who doesn't sell anything, that writes an offer on your house, and they have no clue what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, that's I think always going to be the question that will always probably go unanswered. I mean, everyone can't do everything, unfortunately, but there's solutions to problems, right? Yeah. And whether that's, brokerages designate committees within the brokerage that report to the local board, however it works, to find a solution to kind of make sure that all voices are heard. Because like you said, I think there are some perspectives that are probably missed out just because of the plain fact that you can't be involved. You can't give all your time in all these different places. But the one thought that keeps on crossing my mind is, can you imagine with all the confusion that's currently in our industry, sitting down with your client and they, you've exercised all of your options on what they're looking for. I mean, we're struggling still with an inventory crisis here, and we're sitting here and we're going to limit that even more. Oh, sorry. Yeah. You can't see that home because we've worked together. We have a great relationship, but that's in a different brokerage. So you can't see that home. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it's more of an old school pre MLS thought that we're going back to, which we don't need to go backward. And it's that I'm one of the biggest and I control this market, and I want my agents to sell it, and I also want them to list it both, and we want to get both sides. I mean that's basically the core of it.
I think unpopular opinion, but I think it 100% is. And there's actually, this is in one of the articles I was just reading, so this is kind of interesting. So Compass's revenues in 2021 were 6.4 billion. Okay. Since then, interest rates have caused home sales to drag, which we all know. Plus, we obviously have an inventory issue. So at the end of 2023, Compass's revenues were 4.89 billion.
That's a huge drop.
It's I mean, just
almost
shy of
50%.
just shy of $2 billion that they were down. So again, one of our concerns, and I'll say this, when we very first explored Compass before we made the decision to go to Real, was that all of the tech and all of the money that they put into it, which was phenomenal, but they kind of outspent. And also they paid a lot of agents to come on board. So they kind of outspent what their revenue was. So you have to make that up somehow. So you kind of got to wonder, right? When we say, is this self-serving? And this is not a Compass bashing session. It's just that, Robert Refkin put it out there. Right. So, it's sparking the discussion amongst everybody, is that, okay, so again, why are you doing this? Is this self-serving because you want to control more of the market in your thing? The other thing that he says, which I think it's really, I don't understand, but he talks about how he doesn't feel that NAR is really of a value. And the reason why is because he says that NAR's model is based upon brokerages having tons of agents, because that they have to pay dues, and that's what pays for NAR, which there's truth to that, right? So his thing is, if we just kind of eliminate this, and I'm paraphrasing this, so if I get a couple of these things not exactly correct, I'm sorry, but is that, okay, well, if we didn't have NAR and we didn't have these clear cooperation rules, and then we will have basically, and he says, we'll weed out the agents that don't make any money, that don't sell anything, that really shouldn't be agents. And the top agents will then rise to the top and sell more. And I think there's a little truth to that, but I don't think it has to do with the clear cooperation policy or you controlling the market in a private listing network. I don't think that
I
that's
don't either. And I would argue that it doesn't make any difference how many agents that you have. The top agents are always going to rise.
Right.
So I really think that's what his point is it's just to gain more control that, hey, we're the luxury company, and we're going to do our own thing, which will hopefully attract other luxury agents to their company so they can really control most of it. And he's obviously a very good business person, so I'm not going to necessarily argue, but I'm just going to say a blanket statement. I completely disagree in areas like ours. I can't speak for larger areas.
Well, and the other thing is, and I feel that same way. Okay. And I don't know if anybody too, like, so if you go and you start digging into this, you'll see Zillow, because he's pulling Zillow into it too, right? Which I am not a Zillow fan. If anybody's listened to any prior podcasts, I am the probably least favorite person of Zillow that exists. Yeah. Okay. But at the end of the day, his point is that, you know, we have all these, if we have control, right? So as a brokerage, whether you're Compass or whoever, you have control and you have what you think you need for your database and to grow your revenue and whatever. Well, you don't need to share it with, you don't need to syndicate it anymore, right? So you don't need, it won't be going to Zillow. Well, then Zillow's basically put out of business if everybody did this, which is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't know, but, but they are right now currently the largest, right? So that's where a lot of people go for their home search. And it's because it's easy. I credit Zillow for the platform that they've built and the ease of the consumer to use it. What I hate about Zillow, and this is something that he mentions is that, I mean, we have to pay them, right? Like we have to, they get our listings and then they charge us to market our listings back to us and for leads, which is just stupid. I mean, we really think about that.
It's really crazy that you go out and you do all the work. Yep. and they have this wonderful website and they sell your business back to other agents in your own company. And that is amazing that has gone on. And I don't see it stopping anytime soon unless something drastic like what he is proposing happens, which once again, I really think I'd rather have Zillow do just fine and not have this happen.
Not because I'm scared of what it means for Compass. I'm scared of what it means for the consumer.
For the consumer.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing is too, and to what you're saying, Brad, like his other point is because we have syndication and it goes to all these websites and all these places like Zillow, it allows agents who are not very educated. And I say that in the nicest way, but it's true. It does not, I mean, yes, you have to go through your, hours to get your license. You have to take a test. You have to do continuing ed, but that really, there's no like,
the standard is really low. If
correct.
You consider what we're really doing, I mean, this is the biggest investment of anybody's life, most people's lives.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is you just have to take every state varies, but X amount of hours classes, and then you have to pass a test and you have a real estate license.
Yeah. And that's his problem, is so that if this syndication to these places like Zillow and Realtor.com didn't exist, then you would have agents that then would not be able to really survive because they wouldn't have access to any inventory that the consumer would be going to the experienced agents who have access to kind of the inventory. But if I'm being honest, and I'm curious, if you think about it, it goes back to what you said, but the top performers in your marketplace are the ones that have the listings. So the consumers are going to them anyway. And then it's really just up to them. Like for us in our office, we don't practice dual agency. We've talked about this before. So, when we're referring a listing or a lead to someone else who's called on one of our listings, we're making sure it's going to a qualified individual. And if they're not qualified, they're not in our office, or they have someone who is working with the buyers with them until we know that they are able to do it on their own. But not everybody does that.
Right. But, and I think just to go down a whole separate different rabbit hole here, which could be talked about for hours, and it might be an unpopular opinion, but I think it's partly buyer beware too. We talk about it all the time. You should be interviewing multiple agents. And I'm sorry if your cousin that, just got into real estate a year ago. I mean, you should have some buyer beware that, okay, they're newer. And I know it's tough for people to, with loyalty that we've talked about before too. But at some point, you have to get a grasp of the professionalism that someone provides to you, the product that somebody supplies to you. And so, yes, education, it's very surface level, and what is required from a realtor is surface level. I think we're all in agreement with that. But the people that rise to the top are the people that are continuing to hone their skills and improve to better the consumer's experience.
But don't you think too, and so this leads me down another rabbit hole, and I agree with you 100%, PT, but the problem is too, is a lot of the business models that currently exist out there, and we can speak to this because of the previous model that we were in, which was a local brokerage. There wasn't it did not create, first of all, there wasn't a spirit of collaboration within that brokerage, because it's just not how it was ever, or at least in recent years, how it was set up. In addition to that, the opportunity to learn and grow just didn't really exist. So we would find ourselves going outside of that brokerage to conferences and trainings all over, which is obviously how we ended up at Real, because you realize what you don't have. But that's also a problem. But the thing is that not that they don't want top producers, because they do, because you want market share, right? But you also want to have agents that are brand new, because that's where you make your most amount of money. So going back to the issue that, Robert Refkin has, is that that's what those brokerages models are built on. And that also supports NAR's model of how do they stay alive, because there's more agents and they have more dues. If you got your license and you used to say, Brad, if you get your license, you better factor 3 to 5 years before you're actually really going to be able to support yourself in this business. If that was still the philosophy, instead of what's being sold to these brand new agents by these companies that just want to, I hate to say it.
You can create your own schedule. You can do whatever you want, and you're going to be on the beach all the time, right?
Yeah,
that's that easy.
That's totally how it works, right? But that's the dream that they create, right? Sure. And I feel like that's a disservice, right, to the industry and the consumer. So I do feel like, some of this stuff that's being discussed, I'll give Robert the props for that, is that he has a point, and it's something that is a frustration, and it should be a frustration to consumers too, because, well, I know it is. How many calls have we gotten in our office, agents or team people in our office, where it is a buyer, we talked about this in the podcast, that is frustrated because they are locked into a new buyer's agency contract with some agent that has no clue what they're doing, and they're frustrated. And why, as an industry, why are we not holding each other more accountable?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that's going back to Robert Refkin, is exactly
that's a nameful, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, but that's his point too, is that the quality of the agents, right? So like you said, NAR's goal is to, and it makes sense. That's a good business plan. The more agents that you have, the more that you have in revenue, and the more you really have in dues. But his argument would be less is better. You want quality over quantity, but for NAR, it makes sense to have more people. What was in that podcast? The amount of realtors is double what it was 20 years ago, but the population's only gone up 20%.
Correct. Yep.
So that just tells you that we're trying to drive as many people into these offices as possible. And maybe, when you look at a real estate interview, it's one of those where at a lot of companies, as long as you have a license and you want to work there, right, they're going to take you.
Yeah. If you have the desire and loyalty to the company, then, check mark.
Right. What happened to the days where you do an interview and you say that, hey, you know what, this career may not be a good fit for you, right? Well, and they do that in every other career.
Well, exactly. And that's why, I've been so intentional with everybody that comes in and asks me about potentially, just picking my brain. And it's so important to be completely honest with people, because
it's hard.
Everyone knows it's not easy. And it just depends on where your intentions lie. Yeah. If you're just in here to, maybe collect a paycheck once or twice a month, and, you can take the nights off and the weekends off. And it goes back to for me, it's just like, and I don't know, I guess it's a not common mindset. It's just like, people's have different intentions, is the best way to put it. And, it sounds like that everyone is just kind of come over here, come over here, come over here.
Yeah.
If you're breathing and you have blood flowing in your body,
100%.
I guess.
Well, and it's funny because that was one of the things that attracted us to Real is like the agents that we were watching at Real were producing agents. Their model is set up for producing agents. They also just have an unlimited resource of training and collaboration to help you get better because it's in everybody's best interest. But the business models that currently exist aren't set up that way. And that's why it's not a positive thing. But the other thing I want to mention because of the topic that we're actually on is two things. Number one, I want to be clear. So there's two other brokerages that have this private exclusive network thing, Coldwell Banker and EXP. They're not doubling down on it the way that Compass is. So that's a little bit different. But that does exist. But also, kind of we touched on this earlier, is that even in our current MLS in the Quad Cities, people can choose, which we had a seller do this last year, not to syndicate. You do not. So I don't understand. The agents still know that it's there, but you can choose not to syndicate it out to all these different places. So how is that any different than what Compass is saying in their private or EXP or Coldwell Banker or any of these people that are doing these private exclusive networks? Because a seller can choose that. But what my issue is that going back to is I don't think that's necessarily in the best interest of the consumer. And we actually
hold on. Do I really have to answer that question for you? The reason why they like it that way is so they come to those specific companies.
I know, but what I'm saying is I get that 100%. But I'm saying it's not in the if our job and our role is to serve the consumer, right? And at the end of the day, that's how we grow our business is if we help the consumer. I feel like, I mean, we're going to play this podcast back in about, I'm going to give it 5 years. Well, I'm actually not even going to go that far. I'm going to give it 3 years. I think there's going to be some major lawsuits against these companies because here's what I feel like. I feel like agents are not explaining properly and thoroughly to these clients why there's a benefit to not being in their exclusive network.
Yeah.
Because they're just saying it's all beneficial. But at the end of the day, the stats show otherwise, that if you don't expose yourself to everybody in the marketplace, like you were saying earlier, PT, you're not getting the most amount of money that you could for your home. Now, if you're a seller that truly doesn't care, which there are some, okay, they really don't care. They're a billionaire, whatever, and they care more about not having to have their house exposed than making an extra $500,000. Must be nice, but that's fine as long it was clearly laid out to them, right? I mean, our MLS has a waiver.
All of the and they do where these are all of the things that happen if you don't put your home in the MLS that you're not exposing to the market. And there's a list of items that we've got in ours if you don't want to do that, which I think that's, makes a lot of sense. And I don't know, even if you're a multi-billionaire, why you still would not want the most amount of eyes on your property if you want to sell your property. That just blows my mind.
It just sounds like a 1% issue, in my opinion.
Yes.
It's like, I get it. Okay, you're a very high class person. You want things private. There's some things that you just want. That side I can understand, but that's less than 1% of consumers in this market. I mean,
and not a ton of them live here in the Quad Cities.
Correct, and that's why like this conversation is maybe I don't know if over my head is the correct answer, but it's just like for me, it just makes zero sense. Yes, we do have a higher end market, but it does really well, and you guys can back this up because of the clear cooperation.
100%.
I mean, you guys have a high end home come on the market, and you're exposing it to all the possibilities with people moving in or out. Yep. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, our area with those particular high end clients might be coming from somewhere else. I mean, imagine if you're in Kentucky and you don't know really what the area looks like or how it works or all of that kind of stuff, which if you are moving in, we have a great relocation, different things that we have agents in different areas. But imagine if you had no idea. I mean, you would miss out on opportunities, the seller and the buyer. So it's just like, for me, it seems like a kind of fantasy land issue that like
it does. And I would agree with you. It's more like the 1%, right? And even in our area, I mean, you could argue that in the luxury realm, there's probably 10 agents that sell 90% of those. But guess what? There's another 10% of the agents that never would have seen that property or heard about it unless they logged on to this specific company's website, and the client may not either. That there may not be company A in New Mexico, and they don't even know about the website, right? So I still go back to it that in our area, and I can only speak on our area, it's in the best interest of our clients to expose your home to everybody you possibly can. And the best way to do that is through the MLS.
Well, and to what you just said, here's what's even crazier. Okay. So you just said, and it's true, 90%, like, there's 10% of us that sell in that price range. Okay. And it's usually, the agents that have been a little while, around a while, because as your business grows, your price point grows. But we had three listings over 2 million that sold within the last 12 months, which is insanity. Okay.
Crazy.
But the crazy thing is, if you look at the 3 agents who brought the buyers for those 3 listings from other brokerages, none of them were people that you would put in that 10% that sell in that high end.
Great point. Exactly. Great point.
So you never, and all of them were cash buyers.
Yep.
I mean, that should also blow your mind a little bit. So you're just going to shut that off.
Yep.
And not open that up. That doesn't make any sense to me. Again, it's very self-serving. I don't think it benefits the consumer in the biggest side of things. Now, what I will say,
we're all on the same page there.
Yes.
But what I will say, and I have a little thing I want to share here too. We haven't even got into how this is kind of could be considered a fair housing violation as well, which I feel like that's where I talk about when I say lawsuits down the road. Mark my words. I just feel like this is going to open up another ball of wax on that, because someone's going to feel like they got screwed. Because look we have agents that can't even figure out how to properly explain the buyer's agency, laws now, and have EBAs signed properly. You think that every agent's going to be able to explain why their house isn't being put on the MLS for syndication? I don't believe it. But what I was going to say is as a buyer's agent, though, let's be clear here. We love off-market private listings.
Yeah.
They're great because guess what? Your buyer doesn't have as much competition.
Yep.
Right.
And typically speaking, the seller, because they haven't consulted a professional,
they'll give you whatever you want
for whatever price.
Well, that, and when you're going through the transaction, they're unrepresented and they don't do this every day. So they basically just want to get the deal done, and that's not always in their best interest. But
and I'm going to double down on this, and I don't care if people are, I don't mind, but I'm going to double down on this. It seems this is like a TV shows. Like you see these $20+ million homes, and you have your broker opens, and everybody from the office just gets in the car, and you go drink bubbly in the home, and you throw a party in a vacant home. I don't care what anyone says, no matter what stature they are. That if you say that I don't care when my home sells. Well, if I bring you 2 offers, I'm sure that there is, you want your home sold. There's a reason why that you're putting it out there for potential sales. So I think that's also a flawed excuse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So this isn't an article I was reading earlier today from it's siliconvalley.com. So they obviously go into it, but this is kind of this really interesting, right? And just kind of pounds home what we were all saying is that we don't think it's in the best interest of the consumer, I guess, unless you're the buyer of the property. So James Dwiggins, who's the co-founder and CEO of the Pleasanton-based brokerage Next Home.
That's in the Bay Area.
Yep. He said the only way sellers can know their home's true value is by putting it on the open market. He points to a study by the Bright MLS found that homes sold privately in 5 states and Washington, D.C. between 2019 and 2022 sold for 17.5% less than similar homes on the MLS.
That's a ton of money. Now,
mic drop.
The proof is in the pudding.
Absolutely. And that's what we've been saying this whole time. And why can't you do what Real does, right? Like, why can't you have a luxury division of your company where, it's a little bit escalated marketing. I
think Compass does.
No. But that's my question is, why do we have to have a private MLS rather than just do Real luxury? So then you're getting a different level of marketing in terms of outward appearance, but you're not missing out on all these agents that could be showing the house through MLS, that's why Real, I keep saying this, but Real does things the right way, is they look at big picture, not quick quick picture things, which you always have to take the long view, not the short view of things.
Right. I do love the long view. And
The long
and
view is great,
the long,
especially in Wisconsin.
yeah, it's great. The
On
long
Green
view.
Lake.
The long view. But some of you might know what that is. But anyway, but I kind of want the other thing. I just want to. So okay, we're all on the same page, right? With we don't think this is the best thing.
Yes.
But let me ask you.
We just
high five.
We've talked
it's gonna be
about
loud
this,
in the background. High five.
Very loud. But we've talked about this. We don't have to agree on everything, but we are all 100% on board that we do not agree that you should have your own private MLS.
So my question is though, so going back to the other
I guess that wouldn't technically be called MLS, right?
Correct.
Private listing, exclusive, something.
Exclusive, yeah.
So this though, the other thing that I want to just kind of tackle here, and I don't know the answer, but it goes back to the other side of why this discussion kind of started to begin with, is that, so then how do you deal with the frustration that brokerages and owners and agents have with the mass quantity, I don't know any other way to put it, of agents, licensed realtors, agents in the United States, throughout the world, that do not know what they're doing and shouldn't be practicing real estate? And how do you deal with the issue with NAR that we're talking about, like them, making rules? Basically what people are saying is to benefit them and continuing to collect dues because they have more agent count.
Yeah. And it's really a tough thing too. So I know right now, like a lot of people are or I shouldn't say anti-NAR, but they're not real happy with them. And you could argue that the lawsuit didn't end up, like we wanted to, but it's still one of the biggest lobbying organizations on behalf of realtors, and we can't forget
and like homeowners, the benefit for homeowners.
And homeowners as well. So there's a lot of positives too. But to your point, I'm not sure, because why is it over the last 25 years, why is it that there's so many more agents, yet now we have less transactions and they're still in the business? That just really kind of blows my mind. It's good for NAR, for dues, but I don't think it's good for the general real estate population just around the country. It's not good for the consumer.
Well, we talked about this in a different podcast. I know, PT, but I don't remember the exact number of realtors we have in the Quad Cities right now. It's like 809 something, whatever.
Right.
But when we pulled the stats for last year, because I know there's a stat going around nationwide that, like 78% of agents didn't do anything. Okay. In the Quad City MLS, I believe that it was right about 50% sold one or less homes last year.
That is crazy.
But then that's the person that's writing the offer on your $2 million listing and have no clue what they're doing and makes everybody look bad.
Well, I don't think you can fix every problem in the world, but I think it goes back to my comment earlier. It has to be buyer beware. Yeah. I mean, if you're choosing to work with that person, that's partially your fault, in my opinion. Yeah, it sucks for us on the other side to try to deal with that.
It's so easy right now too. Go online, research. I mean, there's reviews, there's, experience. I mean, and I know, trust me, I know every realtor is a top producer of something. Not sure sometimes what they're the top producer of, but that's hard at times. But you can tell, you can weed through stuff, and you can tell who the top agents are in the area.
And I get everybody's busy, but across the board, everyone's busy. Everyone's such in a hurry to do something. Come sit down with me in my office for 30 minutes. And I promise you, you're not going to be, one, it's not going to waste your time. And two, it's going to benefit you to be prepared for what you're going to go see.
Exactly.
It blows my mind because I would say over 80% of the time that you get somebody calling on a home, they want to meet you there. For what? I'm sorry. Yes, I respect your time, but I'm taking my time out of my day to sit down and make sure that we're on the same page, so that to see if we work well together. I don't know if it's a thing that happened with COVID where everybody's, and it probably partially is a touch in there that everybody's scared that they're going to miss out on a house, but we're changing. We're seeing differences in that, but everyone's in a rush. And this is the biggest purchase in your entire life. Slow down for 30 minutes and everything will be just fine. And then you weed out those issues.
Yeah. And you make sure that you're working with the person that is going to take care of you. I mean, you can tell, they always claim that you can pretty much tell whether you're going to get along with the person within the first X amount of seconds that you meet them. So why wouldn't you do that at the office and that goes both ways, right? So you can tell whether you're going to want to work with somebody else just by how they react to you. I mean, not everybody is meant for each other.
Right.
So that's why I really think it's important to interview your agent, and vice versa. The agent should be interviewing their clients too.
Well, and I think if everyone was doing that, I think some of these antiquated, outdated models would probably start to go away, because the only way they're paying for the buildings and the overhead is by agents that are only selling those 3-4
Yep.
deals a year, because they make, a big portion of their commission. But so that's that. But what I will share is this is echoes what you just said, PT, like about it being the biggest purchase of your life. We just had a call last night with a new client. And this is where, if you're a buyer's agent and you think, and it's funny, I'm not going to tell your story. I'll let you share whatever portion of yours you want to, because you had a similar kind of experience with buyer's agency agreement and a new buyer you have. But if you think as a buyer's agent that then you're just desperate for the business and you're trying to get them to sign this EBA, because that's how you're going to get them to work them, because there's no other way to get them to do it by just, except for getting them in that house and signing on the roof of your car, so you can get a paycheck. If you think you're going to keep them, you're wrong. And we talked about this, and it's not Jimmy and Joey or whoever I talked about, but in this particular one, it was a woman, and I will leave some very details out, but like this person actually looked at one of our own properties that we had listed, wrote an offer with another agent who this particular person thought was lovely and nice, but just felt like she didn't necessarily know what she was doing. Maybe was a little inexperienced, but again, felt like she was nice. Decided after that she didn't get that listing that maybe she needed to reevaluate. She's experienced in purchasing homes. She's purchased several throughout her life. She consulted a friend in another state that was a realtor when she lived there for several years, and said, this is what's going on. And I'm not feeling comfortable with this agent. And, our current agreement just expired, which, by the way, she did have her, sign on the roof of the car going to the first showing that she went to. So she really didn't understand what it was. Expired, and she wanted her to sign a new one. And when she looked at it, she saw it was for another 6 months. And she was just like, I don't want to sign one for another 6 months. I just want to look at one more home. So in consulting this other friend who's a realtor in another state, she says, let me ask you this question. If I know you like her and she seems lovely and you feel bad, but if you want to make an offer on this next home you're going to look at, based on your experience so far, do you feel that she is the best person for the job to represent you? Well, the answer was no. So she didn't sign an agency agreement with her. And she actually reached out to us because the funny part of the story was she had received our name from somebody else, when she first moved here almost a year ago, but somehow got connected with this lady when she called off, I'm sure it was a Zillow lead or something. And that's how she ended up there. So now, turn it around. We're going to meet with that client in person, go through the whole, I told her that's our process. And, we picked up the buyer, and you had a similar situation in a buyer that looked at properties that didn't sign anything that, I mean, and that's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, I would say that, like, if you are a first time home buyer, haven't bought a property in maybe years, if you make a phone call and they said, sure, I'll just meet you over the property, we just have to sign this paperwork before we step in the door, that should be an immediate red flag.
Yeah.
Immediate. And I don't know. I think it's easy for me to sit here and preach and obviously our systems are the best, but and we do it correctly. But the unfortunate truth is a lot of people don't. And so it's easy for me to sit here and say, everyone should be interviewing your agents. You should sit down with them and make sure that they understand the contracts. But I think that comes with the uneducated part too of the industry. So it's tough. I would say that, the best thing is just to kind of feel it out, sit down with the agents, because then you won't be trapped into something immediately with somebody. If you sit down at their office before you go see the house and you don't like the way that you guys are meshing together, you can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to think about this for a little bit, and then you can go interview another agent.
Yeah. I mean, do people buy a car without test driving it?
No.
I mean, sure. If you've had three of the same models and you're just buying the newest one, okay, fine.
I really think a great example, though, is, would you go to a really nice doctor, or would you go to one that knows what they're doing?
Yeah.
And before you have a surgery, do they just do the surgery, or do they meet with you and explain what they're going to do before they do the surgery? Yeah. So why are we as realtors, and why are the people in the general public just running out and doing the surgery without the consultation?
Well,
right?
and don't you feel like, so I think this, to bring this home, I feel like if these things were truly in place and if that's how our industry operated, a lot of these discussions that are existing right now, and the stuff with Compass and what their CEO is thinking they need to do to basically protect his agents, I feel like, right, and his consumers, because he feels like there's a lot of agents that just shouldn't be selling real estate and brokerages that shouldn't be open.
And he has a point there,
right?
But it's
right.
just how they're going about it.
Right. So I'm just saying, so if that would be, let's start with figuring out how to make sure that people are more qualified that are operating in the capacity of a realtor.
Right.
And I don't know that we're going to solve that in this podcast, but
No, we're not. And I really think it starts with, to get into the business, they need to set a higher bar than what they have right now.
I think that should be a future podcast topic is if you're a realtor or you're thinking about it, like, what should you do? I don't think we should get into it right now, because I think we could talk about that for hours.
I thought you were going to ask me to write what needs to be done to get into the real estate business. You wanted me to write the manual.
Well, you go to Illinois games and I'm just kidding.
Join a team.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, guys.
Exactly.
I think that was a great
Yeah,
discussion.
great podcast.
And it'll be interesting to see what transpires. I'm sure we'll have a follow-up podcast on this in future months, and I can't wait to see if
like you said, I'd love to hear this in about 3 years again, just to see what we talked about today and where we're at in 3 years.
Hopefully a better place for consumers.
This problem's not going to get solved.
It's not. Peace.